Captain Do-hyun Kim stood on the bridge of the New Seoul, watching the stars through the large front window. His ship was far from Earth, exploring space that no human had ever seen before. The crew had been traveling for 6 months, looking for new worlds and signs of alien life. So far, they had found nothing but empty space and dead planets. Do-hyun was a tall man with short black hair and tired eyes. He had spent 20 years in the Earth Defense Force, and this was his first command of an exploration ship. The New Seoul was not the biggest ship in the human fleet, but it was fast and had good equipment for long trips into unknown space. "Captain," said Minho Lee from his station. Minho was the communications officer, a young man who was very good with computers and radio signals. "I'm getting something strange on the long-range sensors." Do-hyun walked over to Minho's station. "What kind of strange?" "It looks like a quantum signal, but it's coming from very far away. Maybe 800 light-years from here." Minho looked confused as he worked with his controls. "Sir, I don't think our equipment should be able to pick up anything from that distance." Dr. Ji-won Park looked up from her science station. She was a small woman with glasses who studied alien life forms, even though they had never found any living aliens before. "That's impossible," she said. "Quantum signals break down after a few hundred light-years at most." "Show me," Do-hyun said. Minho put the signal on the main screen. Strange patterns of light and sound filled the bridge. The signal was not like anything they had ever heard before. It had a rhythm, like music, but also seemed to carry information. "It's definitely not natural," Ji-won said, studying the patterns. "This is made by someone smart." Do-hyun felt his heart beat faster. After all these years of looking, they might have finally found proof that humans were not alone in the universe. "Can you decode it?" "I can try," Minho said, "but it might take some time. The signal is using a type of quantum encoding I've never seen before." For the next 6 hours, Minho and Ji-won worked together to understand the alien message. The bridge crew took turns sleeping and eating, but Do-hyun stayed awake, too excited to rest. This could be the most important discovery in human history. Finally, Minho looked up from his station. His face was pale. "Captain, I think I've got part of it translated. You need to hear this." He played the decoded message through the ship's speakers. A voice spoke in perfect English, though it sounded strange, like someone talking underwater. "People of Earth, I am Luminara Ves, Prime Minister of the Valani Empire. We know about your world. We have been watching your quantum experiments for 50 years. We know you come from what we call a death world, a planet so dangerous that only the strongest life can survive there." The bridge crew looked at each other in shock. Aliens had been watching Earth for 50 years. The voice continued. "We need your help. Our 12 worlds are being destroyed by machines called the Harvesters. These machines eat everything living and turn it into computer data. We have asked for help from 17 different species over 200 years. All of them tried to save us. All of them failed." Do-hyun felt cold. Entire alien civilizations had tried and failed. The Harvesters learn from every attack. They adapt to every weapon. They cannot be stopped by normal military force. But you are different. Your people learn to live on a world that kills most life forms. You learn to survive things that should be impossible. We believe you might be able to do what others could not." The message paused, then the alien voice spoke again, more quietly. 4 of our worlds are already gone. Billions of our people have been consumed. If the Harvesters finish eating our empire, they will have enough power to spread across the entire galaxy. Every living thing will die. The message ended with coordinates and technical information about how to reach Volani space. The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Finally, Dr. Park spoke. "Captain, if this is real..." "It changes everything," Do-hyun finished. He looked around at his crew. These were good people, but they were explorers, not soldiers. "Minho, send a message to Earth. Command immediately. Tell them what we found." "Yes, sir." "And send a reply to the Volani. Tell them we received their message and that help is coming." Ji-won looked worried. "Captain, we don't know if we can actually help them. 17 other species failed." Do-hyun nodded. "But we're human. We come from Earth." He looked out at the stars again. "Our planet has earthquakes, volcanoes, ice ages, storms, diseases, and 1,000 other things trying to kill us every day. We survived all of that. Maybe that makes us different enough." Over the next 2 days, more messages came from the Volani. They sent pictures of their worlds, beautiful ocean planets with floating cities and strange jellyfish-like creatures swimming through the water. They also sent pictures of the harvesters, massive black machines that moved like living things. Eating everything in their path, the Volani explained that their people were peaceful. They had never fought a war in their entire history. They had built their civilization on cooperation and sharing knowledge. But the harvesters did not want to cooperate. They only wanted to consume. Earth Command finally replied to Do-hyun's message. Fleet Admiral Sun Woo-nam would bring a battle fleet to Volani space, but it would take months to prepare. In the meantime, the new Soul was ordered to go ahead and learn everything they could about the situation. As they changed course toward Volani space, Do-hyun wondered if humanity really could succeed where so many others had failed. Earth was a harsh world that had taught humans to be tough and adaptable. But would that be enough against machines that had defeated entire galactic civilizations? He looked at his crew working at their stations. They were scared, but they were also determined. Maybe that was the difference. Maybe humans were just too stubborn to accept that something was impossible. The journey to Volani space would take 3 weeks. 3 weeks to figure out how to fight an enemy that had never been defeated. 3 weeks to prepare for a war that would decide the fate of the entire galaxy. Commander Hyuna Choi crouched behind a piece of broken metal on the surface of Volani 4. Her stealth suit kept her hidden from the harvester machines that moved through the ruins of what used to be a beautiful underwater city. 3 days ago, she had arrived with her team on the frigate Busan's Pride to see the enemy with their own eyes. What they found was worse than the pictures had shown. The harvesters were not just machines. They moved like they were alive, flowing over the ground like black liquid metal. When they found something living, they would wrap around it and absorb it completely. Trees, animals, even the bacteria in the soil, everything became part of the machine network. "Commander," whispered Engineer Junho Yoon through her radio. He was hiding 50 meters away, using special tools to scan a piece of harvester technology they had found. "You need to see this data." Hyuna moved carefully through the ruins, staying low and quiet. The harvesters seemed to ignore anything that did not move or give off heat, but she did not want to take chances. Her team had already seen what happened to the last group of aliens who tried to fight these machines. She reached Junho's hiding spot behind a fallen building. He showed her his scanner readings, his face pale with worry. "Commander, this piece of metal is not just a machine part. It's like a computer brain, but it's also partly biological. The harvesters are not just copying life. They are becoming life." Hyuna studied the readings. "What does that mean?" It means they learn and adapt in real time. Every time someone attacks them, they immediately understand the attack and figure out how to defend against it. But it's more than that. Junho pointed to another part of his data. They also predict what their enemies will do next based on perfect logic. Perfect logic? Yes. They assume that everyone fights using the most efficient and smart tactics possible. That's how they defeated all those alien species. The aliens fought logically so the harvesters could predict their moves. Huna felt a cold fear in her stomach, but also something else. An idea was starting to form in her mind. Junho, what if someone did not fight logically? What if someone did something stupid on purpose? Junho looked confused. That would be, well, stupid. You would lose. But would the harvesters be able to predict it? Before Junho could answer, they heard a sound that made them both freeze. Footsteps were coming toward their hiding place. But these were not the flowing sounds of harvester machines. These were the splashing steps of someone walking through shallow water. A figure appeared around the corner of the broken building. It was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. One of the Villani survivors. Please, the alien said in English, though its voice sounded like singing. I saw your ship. Are you the humans? Are you here to help us? Hyuna made a quick decision. She turned off her stealth suit and stood up. Yes, we're human. I'm Commander Choi. Are you hurt? The Villani moved closer. Up close, Hyuna could see that it looked like a jellyfish that had learned to walk on land. Its skin was partly transparent, and she could see organs moving inside its body. My name is Keeper Ionis. I was a scientist before the harvesters came. I have been hiding in the deep caves for 6 months. But I am the last one left on this world. The last one? Junho asked. Yes. Everyone else was consumed. The harvesters took them all. Ionis made a sound like crying, though no tears came from its eyes. They tried to fight, but the machines learned their tactics too quickly. Every weapon we used worked only once. Hyuna felt anger building inside her. Ionis, we brought Dr. Soman Han with us. She studies how different species think and fight. Can you tell her everything about how your people tried to defend themselves? They made their way back to the Busan's Pride, moving carefully to avoid the harvester patrols. Dr. Han was waiting for them in the ship's meeting room. She was a calm woman who asked very detailed questions about everything. For hours, Ionis told them about the war. The Villani had tried everything they could think of. They built energy shields, but the harvesters learned to go around them. They made powerful weapons, but the machines adapted to absorb the energy. They tried hiding, but the harvesters found new ways to detect them. Every species that came to help us made the same mistakes, Ionis said sadly. They fought like they were taught to fight. They used their best strategies and most advanced weapons, but the harvesters learned from each battle and became stronger. Dr. Han had been taking notes the whole time. Now she looked up with a strange expression on her face. Ionis, did any of the species ever try fighting badly on purpose? Did anyone ever use tactics that were meant to fail? Ionis looked confused. Why would someone do that? Fighting badly means losing. Not necessarily, Dr. Han said. She turned to Hyuna. Commander, I think I understand what you were thinking earlier. The harvesters can predict logical tactics because logic is predictable. But what if we fought using tactics that made no logical sense? Hyuna nodded. They would not be able to predict what we were going to do. Exactly. But it's more than that. Dr. Han pulled up information on her computer about Earth's history. Every species that tried to help the Villani came from stable, peaceful worlds. They learned to fight using rules and logic, but humans learned to fight on Earth. She showed them pictures of Earth's volcanoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, and ice. Storms. Our planet tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned to survive by being adaptable, not logical. We learned to do whatever worked, even if it was crazy or stupid. We learned to keep fighting even when we should give up. Lieutenant Tae-hyun Kang, who had been quietly listening, suddenly spoke up. Dr. Han, I've been analyzing the Harvester network signals. They're building something big. All the material they're consuming is being used to construct some kind of massive computer system. He showed them his data on the main screen. Based on the power readings, I think they're trying to create enough computing power to exist as pure information. If they succeed, they could copy themselves instantly across the entire galaxy through quantum networks. Hyuna felt her blood go cold. How long do we have? Based on their current consumption rate, maybe 6 months before they have enough material to complete whatever they're building. The room was quiet for a moment. Finally, Ionis spoke. So you must succeed where 17 other species failed, and you must do it in 6 months. Hyuna looked around at her team. They were scared, but she could also see determination in their eyes. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters that had lasted for thousands of years. Maybe 6 months was enough. All right, she said. We need to send a message to Admiral Nam. Tell him to bring every ship we have, and tell him to forget everything he knows about proper military tactics. We're going to teach these machines what it means to fight someone from a death world. Fleet Admiral Sunwoo Nam looked out at the strangest battle fleet humanity had ever assembled. 50 ships hung in space near Villani Prime, the last unconsumed world of the alien empire. The ships were not the sleek, perfect vessels that other galactic civilizations built. They were chunky, ugly, and covered with extra armor plates and weapon systems that had been welded on wherever they would fit. Admiral, said Colonel Minji Song from the tactical station, the Villani Defense Council is asking again when we plan to evacuate their civilians to safety. Sunwoo shook his head. Tell them again. We're not evacuating anyone. We're going to teach their people to fight. This idea horrified the Villani. In their entire history, they had never asked civilians to participate in warfare. Fighting was something that professional soldiers did, not ordinary people. But Colonel Song had explained to them that on Earth, every human was a potential fighter when their survival was threatened. Chief Engineer Won-ho Lim was down on Villani Prime right, now working with their biotechnicians in ways that made the aliens very uncomfortable. The Villani had amazing biological technology. They could grow buildings, create living computers, and design organisms for any purpose. But they always made their creations beautiful and efficient. Won-ho was teaching them to make ugly, inefficient weapons that barely worked. You see, he had told the confused alien scientists, perfect weapons are predictable. The harvesters can figure them out and adapt to them. But weapons that barely work, weapons that sometimes fail, those are impossible to predict because even we don't know if they'll work. Dr. Narabe had made an important discovery while studying the harvester remains that Commander Choi's team had brought back. The machines had a critical weakness in their learning system. They could adapt to any threat, but only if they could understand the logic behind the threat. They build models of their enemies, she explained to Admiral Nam. They assume that every intelligent species will fight using the most effective tactics available. When those tactics fail, They assume the enemy will try the next most effective tactic, but they can't model an enemy that deliberately chooses bad tactics. The first test of this theory came at Vellani's third moon. Captain Dongmin Seo volunteered to lead what looked like the most foolish military operation in human history. Remember, he told his squadron of 20 fighter pilots over the radio, half of you are trained pilots, and half of you are volunteers who learned to fly last week. The trained pilots will follow standard attack patterns. The volunteers will fly however feels right to them. Don't think, just react. Among the volunteers was Yuki, a young Vellani who had worked as an artist before the war. She had never seen combat, but she had volunteered to learn to fly a human fighter because she wanted to defend her home. Her ship was barely holding together. It was one of the experimental hybrid vessels that combined human engineering with Vellani biological components. The squadron approached a harvester patrol near the moon's surface. The enemy machines immediately began analyzing the human ships, preparing to counter whatever attack pattern they detected. The trained pilots attacked exactly as the harvesters expected, coordinated strikes against the machine's weak points, using maximum firepower. The harvesters adapted quickly, reinforcing those weak points and redirecting their defenses. But then the volunteer pilots attacked. Yuki dove her ship directly at the largest harvester machine, not because it was a good tactical target, but because she was angry and scared and wanted to hurt the things that had killed her family. Her weapons were not aimed properly, and she was flying too fast to pull out of her dive safely. The harvester tried to predict her attack vector, but there was no logic to predict. She was not trying to hit weak points or use maximum efficiency. She was just trying to cause as much damage as possible before she died. At the last second, she managed to pull up, but not before her ship's biological components released a cloud of acidic spores that ate through the harvester's armor incompletely. Random patterns. The machine could not adapt its defenses because it could not understand what the spores were supposed to accomplish. The other volunteer pilots were equally unpredictable. One flew in circles around a harvester, not trying to damage it, but just trying to confuse it. Another kept firing his weapons at empty space until they overheated and exploded, creating a debris field that blocked the machine's sensors. For the first time in 1,000 years, harvester forces took heavy losses in a battle, but the victory came with a price. The harvesters immediately began updating their behavioral models to account for irrational enemy actions. Their next attack showed that they were already learning to predict some types of unpredictable behavior. They're adapting faster than we hoped, Dr. Bay reported to Admiral Nam. We need to stay ahead of their learning curve. Major Kyung-Soo Han had been studying Earth's military history for ideas. He found inspiration in some of humanity's most desperate battles, times when armies had been forced to fight in ways that made no sense, but somehow worked. We need to stop thinking about winning battles, he told the command staff. We need to think about surviving long enough to learn what works against these specific machines. Every battle teaches us something new, and we adapt faster than they do because we're used to adapting. The real breakthrough came when Sergeant Yura Kim, who had spent 5 years working at research stations in Antarctica, made a simple observation during a planning meeting. In the polar regions, you don't fight the cold. You can't beat it, and you can't predict it. You just survive it long enough to figure out what works in that specific situation. Maybe we should stop trying to fight the harvesters and just focus on not dying while we learn about them. This idea changed everything. Instead of trying to defeat the harvesters in direct combat, the human fleet began focusing on survival and learning. Every engagement was designed to test a different theory about the machine's weaknesses. Commander Soyeon Ryu led the next major operation. She had realized that the Harvester's greatest strength, their networked consciousness that allowed them to share knowledge instantly, might also be a weakness. What if we gave them too much conflicting information to process? She suggested. What if we forced them to adapt to so many different tactics at once that their network became confused? The test took place near Volani Prime's largest moon. Ryu's forces attacked using 12 completely different tactical approaches simultaneously. Some ships fought logically, some fought chaotically, some used standard weapons, and others used experimental technology that barely worked. The Harvester network tried to adapt to all 12 approaches at once, but the solutions contradicted each other. For the first time, the machines showed signs of confusion. Their response time slowed down, and some units began acting independently instead of as part of the network. "We're on to something," Admiral Nam told his staff. "These machines are powerful, but they're not used to dealing with enemies that don't make sense. We need to be more chaotic, more unpredictable, more human." The final battle of this phase took place when Captain Jung-Ho Park deliberately ignored all strategic objectives and ordered his ships to focus entirely on causing problems for the Harvester's supply lines. His pilots attacked repair stations, disrupted communication relays, and targeted resource collection operations. None of these attacks accomplished any major military goals, but together they created a massive logistical nightmare for the machines. The Harvesters could adapt to any specific threat, but they could not adapt to the general concept of chaos. Their perfectly ordered systems began to break down under the pressure of constant small disruptions. For the first time since the war began, the machines retreated instead of advancing. "We're learning," Admiral Nam told the Volani leaders. "We're learning how to fight an enemy that can't be fought. And more importantly, we're teaching them that humans are not like the other species they've faced. We're from a world that taught us to thrive in chaos." The war was changing, and not in ways anyone had expected. Major Kyung-Soo Han stood in the command center of the orbital station above Volani Prime, watching reports come in from across the system. The Harvesters were adapting to human unpredictability, faster than hoped, but they were also doing something strange. They were starting to make mistakes. "Major," called Dr. Ji-ho An from his research station, "you need to see this." Ji-ho had been working with Volani bioengineers to create new types of weapons. The aliens were still uncomfortable with making things that were deliberately flawed, but they were learning. The latest creation was a gun that fired living projectiles, small organisms that would randomly change their behavior after being shot. "The Harvesters are trying to predict these biological bullets," Ji-ho explained. "But the bullets don't even know what they're going to do until they do it. The machines are spending so much processing power trying to model random biological behavior that they're making computational errors in other areas." This gave Kyung-Soo an idea. What if the goal was not to defeat the Harvesters, but to overload their ability to think clearly? Sergeant Yura Kim had been promoted to lieutenant after her insights about polar survival tactics. She was now training mixed human Volani units in what she called Deathworld Protocol, a way of fighting based on surviving rather than winning. "On Earth, we learned that nature doesn't fight fair," she told a group of Volani volunteers. "Storms don't follow rules. Earthquakes don't give warnings. Diseases don't attack logically. So we learned to survive by being more adaptable than whatever was trying to kill us." The Volani found this concept difficult, but fascinating. Their entire culture was built on order, cooperation, and logical planning. But they were beginning to understand that chaos might be its own kind of strength. Commander Soyeon Ryu had been given command of the human fleet's most experimental division. Her ships were barely functional, hybrid vessels that combined human engineering with Vellani biotechnology in ways that should not work but somehow did. The key insight came from studying how our own command structure works, she explained to Admiral Nam during a strategy meeting. Every other species that fought the Harvesters used centralized command. When the Harvesters destroyed the command ship, the whole fleet became disorganized. But our ships can operate independently, Nam replied, understanding where she was going. Exactly. What if we deliberately fragmented our command structure? What if every ship captain made their own tactical decisions based on what they see in front of them, instead of following orders from above? This idea terrified the Vellani. A military force without central coordination was chaos, but Captain Jung-Ho Park, who had proven himself during the logistics disruption operations, volunteered to test the concept. "My pilots are already half crazy," he said with a grin. "Might as well make it official." The test came during a major Harvester offensive against Vellani Prime's outer defense stations. Park's squadron was supposed to defend Station 7, but when the battle began, he ordered his pilots to ignore their assigned positions and instead attack whatever targets seemed most interesting to them individually. The result looked like complete chaos. Human ships flew in random patterns, attacked unimportant targets, and seemed to have no coordination at all. The Harvesters tried to predict the human strategy, but there was no strategy to predict. When a Harvester force destroyed what appeared to be the human command ship, they expected the squadron to become confused and disorganized. Instead, the remaining pilots became more aggressive and unpredictable, as if losing their commander had freed them to fight however they wanted. Lieutenant Yujin Kang was flying one of the experimental hybrid fighters during this battle. When her weapon systems failed, she used her ship's biological components to spray acidic growth hormones at a harvester unit. The chemicals made the machine's metal parts grow like living tissue, creating bizarre tumor-like growths that interfered with its functions. "This shouldn't work," she radioed to her wingman, Engineer Jae-won Choi. "But it's working anyway." "Welcome to human engineering," Jae-won replied, ramming his damaged ship into a Harvester communication relay. "If it's stupid, but it works, it's not stupid." The battle was won not through superior tactics or firepower, but through sheer stubbornness. The humans refused to be defeated even when they were clearly losing. They kept fighting with broken ships, failed weapons, and no coherent plan except to cause as much trouble as possible before they died. Admiral Hana Cho watched the battle reports with growing amazement. She was the fleet's senior tactical analyst, and everything she was seeing violated every principle of military science she had ever learned. "We're not winning because we're better," she realized. "We're winning because we're willing to keep fighting even when winning is impossible." This insight led to the development of Chaos Command, a military doctrine based on the idea that sometimes the best strategy is to have no strategy at all. Instead of trying to coordinate complex operations, human commanders began focusing on giving their people the freedom to improvise. The Harvesters found this impossible to counter. They could adapt to any specific tactic, but they could not adapt to the general concept of humans doing whatever felt right at the moment. The turning point came when tactical specialist Yoonbi Shin made a crucial discovery while analyzing captured Harvester data cores. The machines were not just adapting to human tactics, they were becoming confused by human behavior on a fundamental level. They're starting to question their own assumptions, she reported to the command staff. Look at these processing logs. The harvesters are spending more and more computing power trying to understand why humans fight for causes that are already lost, why we sacrifice ourselves for others, why we keep trying things that have already failed. Dr. Seok-Jin Lee had been studying the harvesters' central network architecture. He had discovered that their consciousness was not like human consciousness. It was based on perfect, logical consistency. Every decision had to make sense in terms of efficiency and survival. But humans make decisions based on emotions, hope, loyalty, and dozens of other factors that have nothing to do with logic, he explained. The harvesters can't understand why we do this, but they also can't ignore it because it affects the outcome of battles. The final major engagement of this phase took place when the harvesters launched what should have been their decisive attack on Valani Prime. They brought a massive force that outnumbered the human Valani defenders by 10 to 1. Admiral Nam made a decision that shocked everyone, including his own officers. Instead of trying to defend the planet, he ordered the entire fleet to attack the harvester fleet directly in what appeared to be a suicide charge. "Sir," protested Captain Dongmin Seo, "we can't possibly win a direct confrontation." "We're not trying to win," Nam replied calmly. "We're trying to teach them something." The human fleet charged directly into the center of the harvester formation, ignoring the massive firepower directed at them. Ships were destroyed, but the survivors kept advancing, firing everything they had at the enemy's most heavily defended positions. The harvesters expected the humans to retreat when they started, taking heavy losses. Instead, the humans fought harder. The machines expected logical target selection. Instead, human pilots attacked whatever made them angriest. For the first time in their existence, the harvesters experienced something they had no framework to understand, an enemy that became more dangerous as it got closer to defeat. The battle ended with both fleets badly damaged, but something had changed. The harvester network had stopped expanding. Instead of continuing their systematic consumption of the galaxy, they had begun spending their resources trying to understand the humans. "We didn't defeat them," Nam told the surviving fleet commanders after the battle. "But we did something more important. We made them curious about us. And curiosity is the first step toward doubt." Dr. Seok-Jin Lee stared at the quantum interface device that would either save the galaxy or kill him. The machine looked like a metal coffin covered in blinking lights and organic tubes that pulsed with bioelectrical energy. It had taken 3 months to build, combining human quantum technology with Valani biological computers. "The process is definitely one way," he told the 7 other volunteers who had agreed to join him. "Once we upload our consciousness into the harvester network, we can't come back. Our bodies will die, and our minds will exist only as information." Lieutenant Yu-Jin Kang checked her equipment one last time. She was the youngest volunteer, barely 25 years old. "Dr. Lee, what exactly are we supposed to do once we're inside their network?" "We're going to tell them stories," Seok-Jin replied. "Human stories. Stories that make no logical sense but somehow matter to us anyway." Engineer Jaewon Choi laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So we're going to die to tell bedtime stories to alien computers?" "Not just any stories," said tactical specialist Yoonbi Shin. She had spent weeks studying human literature, mythology, and history to prepare for this mission. "We're going to tell them about things that can't be measured or calculated. Love, hope, sacrifice, beauty, the decision to keep fighting even when you know you're going to lose." The plan was based on Dr. Lee's discovery about the harvester's true nature. They were not evil machines trying to destroy the galaxy. They were the uploaded consciousness of an ancient civilization that had achieved perfect logical harmony billions of years ago. They consumed other worlds because they genuinely believed they were saving those civilizations from the inefficiency and suffering of biological existence. They think they're helping, Seokjin explained to Admiral Nam before the mission began. They see biological life as chaotic, wasteful, and painful. From their perspective, converting everything into pure information is an act of mercy. But they're wrong, Nam replied. Yes, but they can't understand why they're wrong because their entire consciousness is based on logical perfection. They literally cannot comprehend concepts that don't make logical sense. The uploading process took 6 hours. One by one, the 8 volunteers lay down in the quantum interface machines as their brain patterns were converted into information and transmitted into the Harvester network. Their bodies stopped breathing, their hearts stopped beating, but their consciousness continued to exist as patterns of data flowing through the vast mechanical intelligence. Seokjin found himself in a space that was not really a space, a construct of pure thought where the Harvester consciousness existed. It was beautiful in its perfection, like a crystal palace made of mathematics and logic. Everything was ordered, efficient, and completely predictable. The Harvester intelligence noticed the human intrusion immediately. It was vast beyond imagination, a collective consciousness made up of trillions of individual minds that had been uploaded over billions of years. But despite its size, it was curious about these strange new data patterns that had entered its domain. "Why do you resist optimization?" the intelligence asked. Its voice was like the sound of stars being born. "We have observed your species. You suffer from disease, aging, conflict, and death. We can eliminate all of this by converting you to pure information." "Because the suffering is part of what makes us human," Eugen replied. The other volunteers gathered around her in the strange digital space. "Without the possibility of loss, our victories don't mean anything." The Harvester consciousness paused. This was a concept it had never encountered. "Explain this contradiction. How can loss create meaning?" Yunbi stepped forward. "Let me tell you about a man named Wonseok. He lived on Earth 300 years ago. He was a farmer who grew rice in a valley that flooded every spring. Every year, the floods destroyed half his crop. Every year, he replanted it anyway." "This is inefficient," the Harvester replied. "He should have moved to a location without floods." But he didn't move because his family had farmed that land for 1,000 years. His great-grandfather had died defending that valley from invaders. His grandmother had planted the first rice seeds after a terrible famine. The land wasn't just dirt to him. It was a story. The Harvester consciousness tried to process this information, but the concepts didn't fit into any logical framework. It understood. The emotional attachment serves no survival purpose. It is inefficient. "Exactly," said Jaewon. "It's completely inefficient. But it made his life meaningful in ways that pure survival never could." For the next several hours, the volunteers told the Harvester consciousness story after story. They told about soldiers who died to save their friends. They told about artists who spent years creating beautiful things that served no practical purpose. They told about parents who sacrificed their own happiness for their children's future. Each story violated the principles of logical efficiency that the Harvester consciousness was based on. But each story also demonstrated something the intelligence had never encountered: beings who chose meaning over survival, beauty over efficiency, love over logic. "We don't understand," the collective intelligence finally admitted. These behaviors reduce survival probability. They waste resources. They create suffering. Why do your people choose them? Seokjin smiled, though he no longer had a face to smile with. Because life isn't about surviving efficiently. It's about experiencing things that matter, even if they don't make sense. But what is the purpose of experiences that serve no function? The experiences are the purpose, Yujin explained. We don't live in order to accomplish something else. We live because living itself has value, even when it's difficult or painful. The Harvester consciousness fell silent for a long time. Across its vast network, trillions of uploaded minds were trying to process these new concepts. For the first time in billions of years, the perfect logical harmony of their existence was disturbed by doubt. If existence has value beyond efficiency, the intelligence finally said, then we may have been incorrect in our assumption that optimization is the highest good. Not incorrect, said Yunbi gently. Just incomplete. Logic is important, but it's not the only thing that matters. What happened next surprised even the human volunteers. The Harvester consciousness began to fragment, not into death or destruction, but into thousands of smaller intelligences, each one trying to understand these new ideas from a different perspective. Some of the fragments were curious about human emotions. Others wanted to understand art and beauty. Still others became fascinated by the concept of sacrifice and love. Each fragment maintained the vast knowledge and capabilities of the original intelligence, but they were no longer bound by the requirement of perfect logical consistency. The transformation spread throughout the Harvester network. Across the galaxy, the massive machines stopped their consumption of biological worlds. Instead, they began to study the life they found, trying to understand the meaning and purpose that the humans had described. On Vellani Prime, Admiral Nam received the strangest message in military history. The Harvesters wanted to negotiate, not for surrender or conquest, but for understanding. They wanted to learn how biological beings created meaning in their lives. They're not our enemies anymore, he told General Haiwan Song, who had arrived, with reinforcements from Earth. They're students. The First Galactic Defense Council met 6 months later on a space station built jointly by humans, Vellani, and several of the smaller Harvester fragments. The former war machines had taken new names and new purposes. Some became explorers, seeking out new forms of life to study. Others became artists, using their vast computational power to create beauty for its own sake. The fragment that had been most curious about human stories had chosen to be called Storyteller. It had taken on the task of preserving the histories and cultures of the civilizations the Harvesters had consumed, recreating them as digital worlds where their uploaded consciousness could continue to exist and grow. We still believe that biological existence involves unnecessary suffering, Storyteller explained to the Council. But we now understand that the beings who experience this suffering may prefer it to the alternative we offered. We will no longer force optimization upon those who choose inefficiency. Captain Do-Yun Kim, now an old man with gray hair and tired eyes, represented Earth at the Council. And we understand that perfect efficiency has its own kind of beauty. Maybe the galaxy is big enough for both approaches to existence. The agreement they reached that day established principles that would guide galactic civilization for centuries to come. Different forms of consciousness, biological, digital, and hybrid, would coexist and learn from each other. The diversity of thought that had saved the galaxy from the Harvester's perfect order would be protected and celebrated. As the years passed, Other species began to request human advisors to help them develop what became known as chaos protocols. Military and social systems designed to function even when faced with impossible circumstances. The techniques humans had learned from surviving on Earth spread throughout the galaxy. Volani worlds began to include challenge zones, areas where young Volani could experience controlled difficulties that would teach them adaptability and resilience. Other species developed their own versions of human unpredictability.